Hi everyone, thanks for visiting my channel. If you're new, welcome. I'm so glad that you stopped by. I hope you will consider subscribing, like and share my videos, and follow me on social media. I will leave all the links in the description box below. So today we're going to do something really fun with this guy. This is Sam, and he is my sourdough starter. Now, Sam was created a little over a year ago, and I have really been enjoying having him on hand. Now I have to say, I am just a casual sourdough baker. I don't do all the fancy sourdough breads just yet. But this recipe that I'm going to share with you, sourdough pizza crust, is a fabulous way to use up your discard. One of the things that I don't like about sourdough and keeping a starter is you have to either do something with your discard or it ends up just being thrown away. And I don't really like being wasteful, and I know that that's been a deterrent. Some of you have shared with me that that's a deterrent. You don't like throwing things away either, so I like to find ways to use up my discard. So we're gonna be using some sourdough discard today. This recipe is from King Arthur Baking. They used to be King Arthur Flour. Now it's King Arthur Baking, and if you've been around my channel very much, you know that I love their company. I love what they stand for, and this is not a sponsored video, but I do enjoy their products and I love their recipes, and they have thousands of them on their website, and I peruse through there very frequently. So anyway, this is a recipe from their website. I've made it many times, and it's always fabulous. The pizza crust tastes wonderful. It has an amazing texture to it. Even my husband commented every time that I make this particular recipe, he likes it versus my regular pizza dough. I do have another video on just making regular pizza dough. I will link that for you with an iCard and down below, but the sourdough pizza crust is fabulous. So after we make our dough, I'm going to be showing you how to make a cheesy garlic bread pizza. Another one of our favorites, really good, tried and true recipe, simple ingredients, but really fabulous. So I'm going to bring you in close and we're going to get started. Okay, so Sam, when I use him, I take him out of the refrigerator and let him start to bubble. You can see I've got some nice bubbles going on there. That tells me that he's ready to use. So what I do, now he hasn't been fed for a week and a half. I do try to use him once a week to do some baking, but I've been a little bit busy, but it's fine. He will do well neglected for a couple of weeks. It is best to try to feed your sourdough starter once a week, use it and feed it once a week, and just keep it in the refrigerator. That's what I do. It works fantastically, but they can go longer neglected, and they will still, you can usually revive them as long as it's not been months. It's been about a week and a half since I've used him. So he's ready to be fed, and we're going to use the discard in our recipe today. So what I do is take him out of the fridge, let him start to get bubbly, and then I just stir it down. If it's been very long since you've used your starter, you may see some grayish color liquid on top. That's just alcohol from the fermentation process, and you can stir it in or you can pour it off. I always just stir it in if I have any. I don't really have any, but if I do, I just stir it in. All right, so now we need 1 cup of our starter. Now I know a lot of people when they do bread baking, especially when they work with sourdough, they do like to weigh it. King Arthur doesn't give instructions for weighing it here, so I just measure it. They say 1 cup of unfed starter. I'm gonna set him aside. And then we're going to put together our pizza dough. All right, so we need 1 cup of our starter. We need 2.5 cups of flour. I just do the fluff and scoop method. So I just fluff it, then scoop and level it off. And we want 2.5 cups. To our 2.5 cups of flour in our starter, we're going to add a teaspoon of salt. I just eyeball it. I want about a teaspoon. We want 1/2 teaspoon of instant yeast. So this recipe does take a little bit of help from yeast. 1/2 teaspoon of that. And then we're gonna start out using 1/2 of a cup of lukewarm water, but it may take up to 3/4 of a cup. So it just depends on how dry your kitchen is. If you do much bread baking, you know that it can vary. Your liquid, the amount of liquid you need can vary. So we're gonna go ahead and pour in 1/2 cup of lukewarm water. Put it on our stand mixer. I always use my stand mixer. You can do this by hand if you prefer. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the dough hook. And I just start mixing on low. And you'll see it's starting to come together, and you'll be able to tell if you need more water or not. But give it a little bit of time, because we don't want it too wet. You never want your bread dough to be too wet, but the amount of water that you need can vary. Bring it in a little closer so you can see a little bit better. You can see that it's come together in a ball, and it is starting to clean the sides of my bowl. So I think I'm good with 1/2 cup of water. It doesn't appear that I'm going to need any more water. If you need more liquid, you'll see where the flour is not being incorporated into your dough, ball of dough. And if you see any dry patches, then I would just add a teaspoon of water at a time until it starts to come together and it's a nice ball. So now what I'm going to do is just I'm going to leave my mixer on low, just like this, and I'm going to let my mixer knead this for about 7 minutes. You can also knead this by hand if you prefer. Okay, this is for those of you who are new to keeping a sourdough starter. What I do is, I mentioned that I need to feed what's left. And the recipe that I went by was from King Arthur Baking, and they say to use 1/2 cup of your starter, which is what I have. You need 1/2 cup of water, and it's best to use non-chlorinated water, so I always use filtered water from my fridge. And then we need, they give you weights if you want to measure your flour. I don't usually measure it. They say to use 1 scant cup of flour. So again, I just fluff my flour and I scoop out about a cup, and then I take my finger and kind of, so that it's a scant 1 cup, I kind of go make it so that it's not a full cup. So then I just put that in my jar. Use my spatula, give it a stir. If my jar's too crusty, I will put everything in a fresh jar, but typically once I mix it all together, you want to make sure you don't have any dry patches, so I always look at it, make sure there's no dry flour that's not been incorporated. And then I just take a damp paper towel and kind of clean the rim so that it's not so crusty around there. And then I just set my lid on top and set this aside on my countertop until it starts bubbling vigorously again. Once it starts bubbling and gets about halfway up to my jar, then I screw the lid down and I put it in the refrigerator and let Sam hang out in the fridge until I'm ready to use him again next week. Okay, so once you're done kneading, then we need to let our dough rest and rise. So you just need a bowl to put it in. I like using these measuring cup bowls because you can tell when it has doubled in bulk if your recipe calls for that. It's just nice to be able to see how much it has risen. So we're going to put about a tablespoon or so of olive oil, a couple teaspoons to a tablespoon of olive oil in the bottom of our bowl. Your dough, when you're done kneading it, should be nice and smooth. It should feel elastic, and the way I like to think of it is it feels like a warmed up rubber band. So see how it's nice and smooth, and it's a little bit tacky, but it's not sticky. It's not sticking to my hands at all. So then I just kind of shape it into a ball, put it in my bowl, and flip it around to get the oil on all sides. And then we are going to cover him and let him hang out in a fairly warm spot for 2 to 4 hours. Now, I want to mention that if you want a lot more flavor, this is delicious, just making it the day that you're going to use it. It tastes fabulous. But if you want more flavor, in particular more of that sourdough flavor to your pizza crust, you can put it in the fridge and let it rise overnight. And it will have more of a sourdough. It will have a richer flavor to it. But I don't usually plan ahead. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't usually plan ahead enough to do that. So I just let it hang out for the 2 to 4 hours in my kitchen, and then we make pizza for dinner. Okay, so while my dough's hanging out doing its thing, I just want to talk a little bit about sourdough. Some of you have expressed an interest in learning to keep a starter. First of all, I just want to say, like I said earlier, I am just a casual sourdough baker. I'm not one of those fancy sourdough bakers that tracks everything about their sourdough. Keeping a sourdough starter does not have to be complicated, and you don't have to bake every other day with it. You don't have to feed it every day. There are people who do that and they make these beautiful loaves of sourdough, and good for them. I think that that's awesome, but there's just my husband and I don't have enough people to feed to maintain a sourdough starter constantly at room temperature. So I want to encourage you that you do not have to babysit sourdough constantly. What I do is what I just showed you. I take Sam out, I let him get nice and bubbly, I use him for whatever recipe I want to use it, and then I feed him, just like I showed you, half a cup of starter, a scant cup of flour, and a half a cup of water. The water, I always use one that doesn't have chlorine in it, so not tap water. It's always filtered water, I guess I should say, because the chlorine can deter the fermentation process, and we don't want that to happen. So, and then I'll just stick him in the fridge and he just hangs out for a week. This has been a week and a half. I try to bake with it every single week, but you don't have to. You can maintain a sourdough starter every 2 weeks and it still be viable and great to use. I want to encourage you. I have loved having Sam in my refrigerator. I love baking with it and experimenting and learn new recipes. So don't be afraid of sourdough. It is kind of tedious to get it started and to get it going, but maintaining it is not hard. And you don't have to be a fancy baker and bake all the time to enjoy the benefits of having a sourdough starter. So I hope that that encourages you. Some of you have expressed an interest in me doing a video on making sourdough starter. I didn't do a video on it when I started Sam last year because it just seemed like a boring video, but you guys, because it's just basically doing what I just showed you, just at different intervals to get it going. But you guys have expressed an interest, so I will try to do another sourdough starter and show you guys how to get it going and how to maintain it. Anyway, I will work on that. If you are interested in learning about getting a sourdough starter going, leave me a comment. That way I know I'll have enough interest that it would be worth my time to film it. Okay guys, check this out. It has definitely doubled in size, which is what we're looking for. And my starter is so active, it didn't even take 2 hours. So the amount of time it's going to take for it to rise will depend on how active your starter is and how warm your kitchen is. My kitchen's not very warm today, so I was surprised that it doubled in size in less than 2 hours. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put it out on our pizza pan. This will do one 14-inch thick crust pizza, or it will do two 12-inch thin crust pizzas. I'm just going to do one. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to turn it out and just press it down a little bit and kind of test it. If it shrinks back, that means it needs to rest a little bit longer, but this seems like it's ready to go and it's not shrinking back at all, so I can just press it out. And actually this is a 16-inch pizza pan, and it's really doing its thing today. It's really puffy. So I'm just going to go ahead and press mine out to the 16 inches. Because it'll be plenty thick for us. Now what we're going to do, and see how it's not shrinking back at all? So it is really good to go. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to let this hang out, and you want to let it rise a second time, just a little bit, just for 15-20 minutes or so, or until your desired thickness is how King Arthur Baking describes it. So I'm going to let it hang out for 15 minutes. I'm going to get my other ingredients ready, and I'm going to preheat my oven. I am going to preheat my oven to 450 degrees. Okay guys, I've let my dough rise for about 15 minutes, but again, you can let it rise to however thick that you want your crust to be. Just make sure you cover it so it doesn't dry out. I have a set of towels that I use just for my bread. So we are good to go and ready to make our delicious garlic bread pizza. So what I have here is 3 tablespoons of butter. To it, I've added 3 cloves of chopped garlic and about a teaspoon of dried parsley flakes. So we're gonna go ahead and spread that on our pizza dough. Smells amazing already. Okay, so to that, I'm going to drizzle a little bit of my Tuscan herb olive oil on top. This is optional, and you could also use regular olive oil, but this olive oil is heavenly. So if you're interested in the flavored olive oils, check for a local olive oil boutique in your area. They're fantastic. I've talked a lot about this on my channel and in my Facebook group. I've mentioned it, and I love supporting local businesses. So this is going to add great flavor. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon or 2 of some seasoned olive oil. Like I said, again, it's optional. And then we are going to go ahead and top our pizza with some delicious cheese. I have a combination of mozzarella and parmesan. You can use whatever cheese you like. Smoked provolone would be fantastic. Fresh mozzarella, smoked mozzarella would be great. Lots of options. And that was about a cup and 3/4 of cheese. Add as much or as little as you like. And then I'm going to top it with a little bit of sea salt. That's optional as well. Now you could turn this into a regular pizza with tomato sauce and whatever toppings you want. That's fine as well. I'm also going to add a little bit of oregano. To me, pizza's not pizza without some oregano seasoning on top. You could add some red pepper flakes. Any seasonings you like. Okay, so I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. I'm going to put this on the bottom rack. I like the bottom of my crust to have a little bit of crispiness and crunch to it. If you don't want yours real crispy on the bottom, I would put it in the middle of the oven. So we're gonna pop it in the oven for about 15 minutes. Gonna keep an eye on it, check on it. You want your cheese to be all melty and nice golden brown. Okay guys, we are back. I have company. See that? They're hanging out waiting for a piece of deliciousness. Anyway, I baked my pizza for about 12-ish minutes. You'll have to keep an eye on it. It's going to depend on your oven, but it turned out great and my house smells amazing. So I want to show it to you. Look how nice golden brown on top. And I'll give you an up close. There's a bunch of cheese on that one. But see those beautiful pockets of delicious pizza crust goodness. Nice golden brown on the bottom from the cast iron pizza pan. All right, moment of truth. Let's give it a taste and see how we did. The crust is heavenly. It just has a beautiful texture to it. It has great flavor. Like I said, if you want more flavor, let it do a longer rise in the refrigerator. Make it the day before. Let it give it a long rise time in your fridge. It will develop more flavor as it sits. But I'm telling you, it's great, and it's a fantastic way to use up your sourdough discard. So don't be afraid to start some sourdough. Speaking of which, I just wanted to show you, here's Sam after he's been fed and he has set out for the time that it has taken me to make this pizza. So we were at about here, and now he's risen about a half a cup or so in the time that we've made the pizza, and he's getting all bubbly. See his bubbles? once it starts getting all bubbly like that, you can go ahead and pop him in the fridge and let him take a nice long rest until you're ready to use him again. So don't be intimidated by sourdough. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to make these elaborate loaves. You don't have to babysit it daily, hourly. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it is wonderful to have on hand. It adds great flavor. And there are a lot of recipes out there that include a little bit of yeast to give your sourdough some boost. So if it's not something that you're using all the time and it's a little sluggish, there are recipes that include yeast like this one that help to give it a little bit of boost to rise your whatever type of bread you're making. So, but it is fantastic to have on your shelf. And this pizza is great, but like I said, you can use it with any pizza, whatever toppings you like. The sky's the limit. I will link the original recipe from King Arthur Baking. So anyway, thanks for coming along with me today, guys. I hope you'll give this a try, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.